it down. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Finding Genius video series. I'm joined with Shiv Gaglani, the founder and CEO of Osmosis.org. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Kunal, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Osmosis is a comprehensive video education platform focused on healthcare. Its subscribers are primarily medical students and doctors who use the platform to learn more about genetics, microbiology, surgery, and clinical reasoning. Osmosis has recently also raised financing from Greycroft and Felicis Ventures, and it's been growing its video base and subscriber base for several years. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us and share more about your wisdom. And it sounds like you're all on an executive retreat, so vaccinated and things are getting slightly back to normal.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, obviously for a lot of companies, it's been quite a year, but what we found is the past year has led to a lot of tailwinds, obviously in online learning and in healthcare. And so it's been both a challenging but also a really exciting time for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually where I was hoping we could start. Just it's an interesting business to be running during COVID, and also your background as a medical doctor. Could you talk just a bit about your experiencing running a healthcare startup uh, during the pandemic, when more students are going into the field and becoming doctors and trying to learn as well, and doctors are being tested kind of like never before. So we'd just love to hear some of your observations and anecdotes from the last year too.
Totally. Yeah. So, my co-founder and I, we started the company when we were medical students at Johns Hopkins. And actually, we've taken time off, so I haven't finished yet. The
Okay.
joke is I'll finally get my degree from osmosis and
Yeah.
transfer to
Yeah.
osmosis. But we have so basically, even 2 years before most people knew what a coronavirus was, I gave this TEDx talk called "Could You Get an MD Online?" And it was all about how in the next 10, 15 years, and actually even today, there was a shortage of healthcare professionals. The Association of American Medical Colleges predicted 130,000 medical professionals in the U.S. shortage by 2030, and then globally
Wow.
that's even worse because if that's happening in the U.S., obviously in middle lower income countries like Indian healthcare system, as we're all experiencing now as we're recording this,
Right.
even worse shortages. So the mission of Osmosis was to basically streamline and make it more possible for anyone who wants to care for someone to provide care, not just medical, but nursing, PA, audiology, paramedic. We work with all of them. To be able to learn more efficiently and hopefully take 4 year med school, turn it into 3 year, reduce the debt, reduce the time commitment, but keep the quality as high, even maybe even higher, because we can flip the classroom and do something more effective with active learning strategies. And so then fast forward, COVID hits and everyone has to go online, right? So we actually tripled the number of institutional partners we worked with. We work with some great partners like NYU, as well as UC Irvine Nursing, and then a bunch of international programs. So that's been a good tailwind for us and other online learning companies because you can't go to lectures with 50,
Right.
100,
Right.
200 people. And then also from a societal perspective, I think there's a lot of renewed interest in healthcare heroes and supporting them. So my hope is that one of the silver linings post COVID, at least in the US, will be some organizational or governmental changes where it's kind of unconscionable, I think, for our future healthcare heroes to graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt.
Right. And NYU is sort of leading the charge in that. No, they've made the NYU Medical School completely free.
Yeah, they're I mean super pioneering. When I was in med school at Hopkins, NYU was probably like in the 15th or 20th ranked med school, and now it's number two. I think
Wow.
because of changes like that. And then another one of our partners is Kaiser Permanente's new med school, and they've done the same thing. It's free tuition.
Wow. Before we get into osmosis, which I think is probably the what led to you founding the company, why do you think, just broadly speaking about education in the US and then specifically around med school, why is it, do you believe, designed this way to test the mettle of someone who's going in to become a healthcare hero, both from the financial side, which is a completely different equation, but then also just the sheer amount of years and labor and intensive labor that they're put through in order to become a doctor. It'd just be interesting to hear why was it designed this way also.
Yeah, so the current state of medical education is based off of a 1910 report called the Flexner Report, which was actually based off Johns Hopkins. And 100 years after that, when my co-founder and I enrolled at Hopkins, they were still talking about how Hopkins was the model for modern medical education. which is true, but that model was, 2 years of preclinical curriculum where it's very course heavy, lectures, etc., and then 2 years of apprenticeship clinical curriculum. And like what's happening in K-12 or any other forms of education, business school, law school, there's a lot of debate about what types of curriculum do you need to provide someone so that they can then become an effective lifelong learner and continue contributing. So in medical context and nursing and PA schools, there's so much debate of how much nutrition should we teach, how much AI and digital health should we teach, etc. And so it's just really hard because these schools are run by people who are busy, clinicians,
Right.
researchers, other faculty members, and they just can't adapt their curriculum as quickly to meet those standards. And so, that's why we're still learning algebra in K-12 as opposed to, statistics, as much as statistics is much more important than algebra for like the day-to-day functioning, or personal finance is another example. And
Right.
so I think it's just an antiquated curriculum system, and that's one reason Osmosis decided to, instead of 1 hour lectures, which are really hard to change and too much time, take that 1 hour, make it super efficient. Don't lose what's important, but make it visually appealing and efficient. Do it in 10 minutes, and then you can have more time for more curriculum if you want that, or frankly more patient contact, which is more important, I think, to the development of our clinicians.
Right. And you just touched on this a bit, but before we get into how it started and what led to it, how do you think when you talk with other ed tech founders or you decide to design this, how do you think, since 1910, we're a little bit outdated now, where do humans and how do humans learn best based off of where we stand today and what you've learned?
Yeah, so fortunately, humans are getting smarter, right? But that's partially because of nutrition. Social media and like conspiracy theories aside, our brains are actually functioning better because nutrition, because the Flynn effect, where IQs are getting higher over time. Um, However, the need to memorize and regurgitate information is no longer that important, right? We have clinical decision support tools, which are basically second brains and should be, right? Tools that can help, basically provide not only the physician or clinician, but also the patient symptom checkers more information about, their conditions and what they should be able to do. So I think one of our premise at Osmosis is let's develop lifelong learners. So we have a whole like course and book on how to be a better learner. We just got approved for continuing medical education, which is a $3 billion market in the U.S. And really important because again, what you learned. We all saw this play out in COVID. What you learn even month one of a new disease is totally different than what we know about the disease 3 months later or a year later.
Right.
And so that's happening in diabetes, that's happening in hypertension, that's happening all the time. And so it's imperative that all of us become lifelong learners, and especially clinicians. And more of the skills that are so-called soft skills, like connecting with people, the mental health care that we're seeing, the huge boom in telemental health that we've all seen, those soft skills are much more important, I think, than like the hard skills of like regurgitating information for tests and then eventually for diagnosis and treatment.
Right. And I know it well, but just for the benefit, and maybe I didn't do a good job of describing it in the beginning, but for the benefit of people listening, what does Osmosis look like today before we get into how it was started and what it looked like in the early days of what exactly is on the platform when you come on and who is it serving?
Yeah, so it's a subscription service company. We have a freemium model. Basically, Osmosis has virtualized all of the preclinical curriculum and increasingly the clinical curriculum to become a clinician. So we have over 2,000 videos that cover everything from atrial fibrillation to Zika virus on the pathology side, physiology, pharmacology, soft skills, as I mentioned, how to take patient notes and connect with people. So the idea is anyone anywhere should be able to get a world-class medical or nursing or PA education. And most of our clients are either the schools who are augmenting or supplanting their curriculum, or the students. We have tens of thousands of paying subscribers, but over a million registered learners who come to us either because they want to get into school or they want a refresher because they're currently practicing those kind of things.
And so starting a content business is not easy. And I'm sure you heard the same uh, kind of boilerplate comments from VCs when you first went out to raise the first round of money around the content business. But since like now 2,000 videos and several thousand subscribers later, what did those first kind of 10 days, 15 days, 10 subscribers, 50 subscribers look like for you? of managing what is the content that we're going to launch as a med student in Johns Hopkins? How are we going to bring on those early subscribers, and what did that growth look like as you managed both sides of it? Or do you have any interesting growth hacks that you used early on too?
Totally, yeah. So for the first few years, as we were medical students, and then I went to business school, we actually were not a content company. We were a 100% platform play, and the platform allowed learners to upload open educational resources,
Oh,
um,
interesting. Okay.
to like also upload their course documents privately in folders, like Course Hero does, as well as like Quizlet before Quizlet became big, at least in our, globally, to allow learners to create their own flashcards and questions and share those. So there's a lot of OER, open educational resources, as well as user-generated content, which got us so far. That was really, we went from 120 Hopkins Med student to 5,000 students within 3 or 4 weeks, because we also released a mobile app and had some of
Wow.
those viral network effects early on. But then we realized that, through a lot of user research and feedback from the market, we realized that students really wanted trustworthy video content. And so I had become friends with the former head of medicine at Khan Academy Health. His name's Dr. Rishi Desai. And Sal wanted to focus on K-12. Rishi wanted to go deeper into healthcare. And so it was a very positive kind of experience where he and the Khan Academy Medicine team joined Osmosis and started
Oh,
producing
interesting.
videos, because they had ideas on how to make the videos more visually appealing, how to script them so they're still short, and then obviously hiring medical illustrators, because it's one thing to write out, again, algebra equations. It's another thing to draw an accurate depiction of the heart. And so we
Right.
started releasing these videos for free on our YouTube channel. And I think when they started, we had maybe like 8 subscribers on YouTube. And now we're about to cross 2 million subscribers on YouTube. So releasing a lot of our content for free on YouTube, and then also Wikipedia, Medscape, and a bunch of other places, was the growth engine for the company.
Wow. And I guess what's a growth hack on the YouTube side of when you were releasing content out there? I mean, now you're seeing so many different, this is completely separate from Osmosis, but you're seeing folks just pushing content all the time and trying to grow their base and this creator economy that we're going after. What were some of the growth hacks that you used early on to build that YouTube following?
Yeah, luckily, again, the Khan Academy team not only brought experience scaling a content production engine, but also content distribution. So we knew a lot about YouTube growth hacks. For example, putting up a banner where you specifically say how when you're releasing content, having a specific release schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday in our case, turning front bumpering and back bumpering each video to then get people to the site, because we didn't want to give away too much on YouTube, obviously.
Right, right.
We need to funnel people to our subscription site. Some of these hacks are still relevant, but some of them have changed.
Interesting.
And so, I'm a huge fan of Reforge, and Andrew Chen is one of the people who writes for Reforge.
Right.
And he has this great article called The Law of Shitty Click-Throughs, which is all about how when there's a new channel, if you can be the first, DJ on Snapchat like DJ Khaled was, you can grow a viral following, and you benefit from experimenting in new channels. And we were one of the newer channels or one of the more trustworthy and scaled channels on healthcare for YouTube. And now we have an official partnership with YouTube. But we're also
Wow.
experimenting on TikTok. We're experimenting on Clubhouse, just to be kind of hedge the bets, because
Right.
you don't want to be left behind if you didn't have a presence on a certain channel.
And so deeper on the healthcare side, when you were first starting off with this user generated content and then slowly moved over with the Khan Academy team into building and creating your own content, how do you mentioned this earlier, but how do you make sure that this content stays relevant? Because you were saying there's so many new developments and continued learning, and especially in healthcare, where understanding and the research of ophthalmology or nephrology continues to change. How do you keep that content current that med students can continue learning from and staying on top of what's going on in the research in the field?
That's a really, really good question. And so we we do a couple things. So we've built a proprietary tool internally called Osmosify, which is basically the way to think about it. It's like Canva for video. So it's possible for someone like, so say an average 10-minute osmosis video has about 20 scenes, 2 scenes every 30 seconds. We're able to splice out certain scenes that may be incorrect because the guidelines changed. And instead of having to reproduce the whole 10-minute video or hire a faculty member to come in and dress up and provide another presentation, we can have the same voiceover artist, but a different editor, a different illustrator, kind of splice out a minute from this 10-minute video and fix it. And so we have more surgical kind of content updates because of our proprietary tool, as well as our ability to, we've sort of made a Adam Smith-esque division of labor. So instead of, again, one faculty member being the scriptwriter, the voiceover artist, the video person, the PowerPoint creator, we have 5 different people who do each video, but they do it extremely well. Like we have editors just turning through editing videos. We have a voiceover artist providing voiceovers for hundreds of videos. So it's the production process. We also have a really interesting feature. I think we're still the only company that does this in our space. You know how LinkedIn will send you a message and say, hey, someone you knew has changed jobs. Why don't you congratulate them?
Right, right.
We do something like that for content updates. So if you're, if you learned about diabetes on day 1 of med school and then 3 years later we update that video because the guidelines changed, you get a notification saying something you once learned has changed. And if you go review it, you can get, if it's relevant, CME credit if you need CME. So that's a pretty unique feature that we put into the space as well.
Wow. And I guess, you just mentioned the CME credits, but what was the reception or the perception that Osmosis got and had with the old guard of folks teaching medicine? So the bigger universities, and they've been doing it since 1910 in a very similar way. And now you come along and say, okay, this can maybe eventually replace the medical degree. And then COVID hits and they need to do it virtually anyway. But what was the reception? How has it evolved? And where do you see this going in terms of partnerships with them, or in terms of making this a full degree that can be done online, where I can also become accredited in some ways too?
Yeah, so one thing I'll caveat is I think to actually get your degree to be a clinician, you need the patient care. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is just make all this didactic stuff efficient, cheap, more fun and engaging. You still need to go to a health system or a health clinic and meet patients and take care of them.
Right.
Obviously, VR and telehealth can virtualize some of that, but really it's important. Obviously, you don't want your surgeon to just get an online degree.
Yeah, right.
Neurosurgeon from the University of Phoenix. Right? And so, though eventually that may happen, a lot of that may happen. A lot of your training could be done at that. That's a great school, and we know a lot of people there. But we we want to be able to. As I said, make it accessible. I think at scale, what we want to try doing is not just train medical nursing, PA, and other healthcare providers, but patients too. We already generate over 6 figures of revenue from just educating the patients, because if you have diabetes and you can better manage that by taking metformin or other drugs, or actually better yet, reversing that diabetes through things like what Verta Health is doing, you're able to. You don't need as many clinicians, right? One way to fix the clinician shortage is to train more clinicians, and other ways to get the patients to be more engaged in their own health for things that are preventable. Not everything is preventable, obviously. So the reception, though, with the faculty, I think, has been, they view us more as partners, because there are a lot of online medical education video companies now, but a lot of them use professors from Harvard or Tulane or wherever. That's kind of threatening, right? It's like, okay, I'm paying to go to, University of New Hampshire med school. Why am I zooming in a Harvard professor as opposed to? So whereas Osmosis is sort of like Switzerland, it's 10-minute videos, it's whiteboard style. We can white label it for universities, and the reception has become a lot more positive. In the early days, it was like, oh, this is cartoony and visually kind of childish, but then at the same time, it's what the students are learning with. And so being a very strong B2C business as we started has really helped us with B2B traction now.
Wow. That's really interesting. I know we're almost running up on time, but where does Osmosis go from here? Now you just mentioned that you have subscribers that are patients as well. You have clinicians on there. Is this something that pharma starts to use to recruit for clinical trial recruitment, or do you see yourselves as purely an ed tech platform that continues to evolve and grow with more content and keeping it fresh and more building in some of the stuff that you had done early on with user-generated content on there also? But how do you see Osmosis 5-10 years in?
Yeah, so our vision is everyone who cares for someone will learn by osmosis. And our big, hairy, audacious goal is that by 2025, 1 billion people will have learned in some form from osmosis. Obviously, 10% of the world won't be clinicians, so a lot of those are patients. And we're basically trying to, as I said, we have patient education coming live. And so we have partnerships with large digital health companies like 23andMe, the CDC, National Organization for Rare Disorders, who are essentially paying us to create content or license content that they can use not just for their provider or staff training, but also for patients. Every
Interesting.
company is getting into healthcare in some way, right? Like Amazon is doing Amazon Care, Walmart, CVS, all sorts of companies are now healthcare companies. And so we see ourselves as being much more than just, training medical nursing and PA students in schools. That's a good core that we've set up, and that's going
Right.
well. But there's a lot more growth to be had, I think, there.
Interesting. And what broad lessons do you have for other ed tech founders or folks that are launching content businesses, specifically subscription businesses, not ad supported businesses? Do you have any lessons on, since you've done this and you're doing it pretty successfully?
Yeah, I mean, I think focus is the hardest lesson that I think applies to any company, but focus, like being really good at one thing. So even within content, instead of trying to boil the ocean and create content across, 10 different domains initially, like be the best at one domain. Like we chose pathophysiology and we became that. And then that gave us the resources and the brand cred to then move into pharmacology and clinical reasoning, or we became really good in medical, and that's helping us be good at nursing and PA. There's halo effects. So I think that's one of the core lessons I would suggest. And then finding ways to recycle content, right? So we also, through our Osmosify, are able to slice and dice content. It's called the content cascade. So we start with we start with a script. The script can become video. Those videos can become still images, right, that people can download.
Right.
The script can become highlighted notes, flashcards, questions. So basically finding ways to recycle and make the content, self-enhancing, as opposed to kind of spending all the cycles and the money and the time to make totally disparate content.
Interesting. Shiv, thank you so much. This was really helpful.
Kunal, thanks for having me. It's really great talking to you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, you too. All the best.